This new fighting type Mew deck is perfect for the current metagame. What is going on, guys? It's Matty here, and today we have a video focused around a specific deck list that I saw recently doing really well in an online tournament, and I looked at it and I thought that it was absolutely perfect, and it should be a deck that everybody is playing in the current metagame. Let's go ahead and talk about it a little bit. Fighting type cards have become exceedingly great in this new format. They're really good to counter things like Gyarados being able to snipe your opponent's Magikarp on their bench with Hitmonlee, the ability to take revenge KOs for low amounts of energies on a single prize Pokemon with Marshadow, and the ability that it's really good against Pikachu. The combination of that and sort of the tempo deck consistency of Aerodactyl EX, which is actually a pretty consistent attacker, which can do 80 damage for 2 energies, while also kind of activating that Primeape Law ability to do a little bit of disruption to our opponent. And the Farfetch'd card from Genetic Apex, which allows us to, again, do really early damage, a very fast-paced sort of aggro deck here. And that's what fighting type decks do the best. They're very fast-paced, very aggressive decks, which just happen to be really strong in a format right now, dominated by things like Mewtwo, by Gyarados, by Celebi, that like to sort of set up and in the late game sweep. However, we're a little bit faster paced than those decks, so we can put a lot of pressure on, especially in the early game. Now, a lot of the best fighting type decks in a lot of these online tournaments have been sort of a flex between an aggro fighting type deck and some sort of a tempo build, typically always including Aerodactyl, because it is a very consistent stage 1 attacking Pokemon. It does 80 damage for only 2 energies with 140 HP and a retreat cost of 1. It seems a little mediocre at first, but it's actually really good because it does provide a little bit of value with its Primeval Law ability just sitting on the bench, so we don't necessarily need to attack with it. However, the other card that actually fits really well with this fighting type deck is Mew EX, since genome hacking is a really strong attack that takes 3 colorless energies, and since none of the other Pokemon in our deck kind of require us to have a lot of energies, we can kind of commit some of those energies to Mew EX and help cover some of those longer term matchups or matchups against decks in the mid to late game that we otherwise would struggle with just a pure aggro deck. So this deck is really, really strong. It's been doing really well in recent online tournaments, and aggro fighting type decks in general have been really good. So I thought it made a lot of sense to pair Mew EX with this particular archetype, and it's been doing well in online tournaments. So let's go ahead and we'll play some matches. We'll see how the deck functions. We'll talk about it a little bit more in more detail. But yeah, I'm just a little bit excited because we haven't actually done any live gameplay on the channel for a little while. So I'm really excited. It should be a fun video. So let's get in, play some games, and see how this deck really goes. All right, now before we get on to the gameplay, I am going to ask you guys to please subscribe to the channel. We are on the road to 10,000 subscribers, and we've gotten a ton of subscribers over the last few weeks, and I really do appreciate it. The support has been phenomenal, but we have a ton of returning viewers that are not subscribed to the channel, so I would really appreciate it if you guys would smash that subscribe button, as well as the like button. Comment below as well what your opinions are on this deck list. I would love to hear it. But anyway, guys, let's get into the gameplay. All right, on to our first match with this new fighting type Mew EX deck. It really is kind of a perfect anti-meta deck right now in the format for a variety of reasons. Now, Gyarados became so popular, it became such a dominant deck in the first week or so of Mythical Island of this new format that people were heavily playing Pikachu to counter Gyarados, which is a good option. However, what people realized, as we start with Hitmonlee Perfect, and we're going second, which is a pretty good outcome for us, but what people realized was that actually these aggro Hitmonlee fighting type decks were even better against Gyarados in some scenarios, but they were also good against Pikachu, right? Because it's a fighting type deck and we hit for weakness. So people thought like it just made a lot of sense for us to be playing these Hitmonlee fighting type decks, and because it's just good against Gyarados and Pikachu. So it made a lot of sense, and I think the meta is evolving in a certain way. Okay, so we're playing Pidgeot and Gyarados. This is interesting. I am going to bench the Mew EX. Sorry, I'm just trying to talk here a little bit about the metagame and as to why this deck is good as we play it. But yeah, we're definitely just going to start attaching to this Hitmonlee and just attacking this Pidgey. If he doesn't find a Pidgeotto next turn, he is going to be in a world of trouble here. I'm actually going to play... we already played our supporter, so we're just going to play our Pokeball first. And there's a Marshadow, which we also like to see. 4 cards in hand. We could red card here. I mean, what are the odds that he has a Pidgeotto in his hand? I mean, are they high? I don't know. 4 cards in hand. I mean, it's interesting, right? Do we play the red card? I think because he has stage 2 Pokemon in his deck, we're going to hold the red card. I think that's probably the best way to play it. But yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and stretch kick and put some pressure on this Pidgey early on in the match, which should be really, really strong. The other cool thing about Hitmonlee is it dodges Druddigon. Druddigon is really popular right now in the format, and we're able to do damage with Hitmonlee early in the game without actually taking any damage from the rough skin ability on Druddigon. Okay, so he plays a research here, probably going to find a Pidgeotto, which if he doesn't, that's unfortunate for him, fortunately for us. But yeah, so Hitmonlee is really well positioned right now, but the inclusion, when you combine it with Mew EX, it makes this matchup spread so much more flexible without really sacrificing a lot of consistency or the overall sort of strategy that this deck likes to sort of employ, which is, again, really, really strong. Okay, so he's going to go into his Mew EX here, again, probably just to put some pressure on our Hitmonlee with this Psyshot, which is definitely interesting. I'm trying to map out our strategy here. He is playing Psychic Energy, so he's playing Psychic Pidgeot with Mew EX, right? So he's going to try basically to hit us for super effective damage. He is going to be 2-hit KOing our Hitmonlee, which is interesting. But here, so I think what we're going to do is we're going to bench this Farfetch'd, and I'm actually going to commit an energy to our Marshadow. Now, we could play red card this turn. He did play Research and a Pokeball, but he still doesn't have the Pidgeotto in hand, so it doesn't really make sense for us to do that, you know? But here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna play our Research. No need to play Sabrina yet. There's an old Amber in the Aerodactyl. We didn't make any room for Aerodactyl, but it's totally fine. We don't necessarily need it in this matchup, I don't think. And the Farfetch'd, here's what we're probably gonna do is we're gonna KO this Pidgey, right? Like this. And then basically, our strategy now is once we take a hit from this Mew EX, we're just going to go into our Farfetch'd, hit for 40 damage, and then wait basically until our Farfetch'd gets KO'd. And once it does, we can go to our Marshadow and clean up a KO on this Mew EX. That's kind of the strategy here that we're going to kind of choose here. Here comes another Pidgey, which is totally fine here. And he's going to play the blue. The blue actually doesn't really matter for us whatsoever. We're not really worried about it. This Psyshot is going to be doing damage to us for sure. I'm not really worried about this Pidgey, in all seriousness. Like, it's just not really sort of a big deal to us. We're going to attach to the Farfetch'd. We are just going to X-Speed. I would rather just conserve the energies and use our X-Speed here. But yeah, Hitmonlee and Farfetch'd and Marshadow is just a really strong sort of aggro combination. But it does kind of feel sometimes like, you know, there are matchups that we struggle against. And those matchups are mainly decks that, you know, necessarily can deal with sort of that early chip damage well, or can kind of live a revenge attack from Marshadow. And those are scenarios where Mew EX is really good in. Things like Charizard against Mewtwo, it can be really good. Against Arcanine, doing 120 damage as well to the active is just overall really strong. So here comes the Pidgeotto. Now, I'm actually, like, I feel totally fine just, like, straight up attacking with Mew EX over and over again. Now, Pidgeot has, I think, 170 HP. I believe is how it works. And now the Pidgeot it's a little bit sketchy because the Pidgeot is KOing us. It's gonna one-hit KO us no matter what, right? Everything on our on our board. Okay, so here's the thing now. I think what we probably want to do again is just retreat into the Hitmonlee. And I'm gonna actually commit this energy to the Mew EX. We're gonna spread it out a little bit, kind of increase our options. And then, yeah, we're just going to attack this Pidgeot, basically, or this Pidgeotto. He's not a Pidgeot yet. He might evolve next turn, but even if he does, he needs 3 energies to attack. So I would rather get the chip damage off on the onto this Pidgeotto. That way, even if it does evolve, we could potentially KO a Pidgeot with a little bit less HP with our Mew EX once it gets set up. So here's the Pidgeot. That's fine. 170 HP, except we're doing 30 damage to it. So now it does have... Okay, he's just going to go ahead and KO the active, yeah. Sure, that's totally fine. We're just going to take the KO with our Marshadow, and we're going to win the game. We were able to kind of play 2 split different scenarios there in a way that was pretty consistent. In the fact that Mew EX was able to, again, cover the matchup against Pidgeot. We could potentially would have hit him for, you know, 100 to 120 damage, which is really strong. Our opponent now realizes that Marshadow is just going to take the KO. So, yeah, again, really strong, right? That early kind of damage, being able to take a KO on that Pidgey early in the game with Hitmonlee, kind of set us up for the ability to only have to KO either the Pidgeot or the Mew EX to win the game. And then we had Mew EX and Marshadow to do those KOs, right? So very easy, very kind of fast-paced matchup here. This deck is really good in so many different scenarios. Let's hop into another match and talk through it just a little bit more and see what else we can do with this particular deck. Okay, let's hop into another game. Yeah, so I really love Mew EX in this fighting type deck. Again, I just think that in the format right now, aggro decks are becoming exceedingly better just because people are still really fixated on the sort of the mid-range decks, the setup and sweep decks like Gyarados, Mewtwo, Charizard is one of them. Celebi as well, people play as a sweeper deck. So a lot of decks just really get kind of rushed down in a really interesting way. We're going first, which is an ideal. We start with an Aerodactyl and a Mew EX. I don't know where we're playing yet, so I'm not going to bench the Mew. Okay, so we're playing Primeape with Mankey, which is certainly interesting. This could be a very, very interesting matchup here. We're going to bench this old Amber 100% just because we have the Aerodactyl in hand, but I also think it's going to be a pretty good scenario for us. And I actually like this Marshadow quite a bit as well, so we're going to bench the Marshadow. And I'm not going to bench the Mew yet. I don't know if there's really necessarily a reason to, unless, yeah, I am going to bench the Mew EX. I know I said that, but I would like to be safe from Sabrina at least a little bit. So Hitmonlee's also pretty decent in the, against the Primeape matchup, right? Primeape does more damage the more energies that are damage that it's taken from it. Mankey does do pretty decent 30 damage on turn 1. Which can be a little bit interesting for us. Okay, so he's just going to go ahead. We're going to get attacked here for 30 damage. Now, here's the thing. He might have the Primeape in hand, which means that he's just going to attack for either 50 or more next turn. I'm not even sure, but now he can't evolve his active Pokemon, which means that we're going to be able to live a hit regardless. And this is pretty funny. This is why Aerodactyl is good in the mirror matchup against other aggro decks. It's also good against Blaines as well. If you go against the Blaines and they have like a Ponyta or a Ninetales in the active spot, we're basically forcing him here to we're basically forcing him here to attack us or bench a Pokemon, and if he benches something, then we can just sort of attack with Hitmonlee. But yeah, he's actually just going to play Giovanni and attack into me for 40 damage, which is an interesting play, if we're being honest with you. He's doing 10 damage to himself while he does this. We might be forced to retreat out here, and here's the red card. Okay. The red card is certainly an interesting option here. So, I mean, I think what we have to do is, I don't want this Hitmonlee to go down, so I am just going to attach to it. We didn't try to do any X speeds, which is really tough for sure. But yeah, I'm actually going to play this red card. I know he hasn't played any other basic Pokemon, but I don't actually mind if he does. I would rather just minimize his hand and make it a little bit smaller. So I'm just going to play the red card here. We have Aerodactyl in play. He can't evolve this Mankey unless he retreats out. He can attack us for 30, but if he does, he's getting KO'd. You know, next turn we can just sort of start attacking for 80 damage. Aerodactyl is a really good tempo card. It counters sort of the mirror matchup or other aggro decks pretty well. Okay, we're going to see the quick concession from our opponent. I think Aerodactyl just really stunted him there. It kind of really countered the Primeape or the Mankey Primeape strategy. But okay, all right, one more game. Let's hop into another game and see if we can, you know, showcase the deck just a little bit more, maybe against another matchup where the game goes a little bit longer. Okay, game number 3. Let's do it. Let's do it. We're playing against somebody who is from a different language. I don't know what the guy's name is, but we'll see what we're going up against. A lot of people are playing fighting type decks. Aggro fighting is kind of the top archetype right now. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if it ended up being the most played deck. It was pretty surprising. I'm probably gonna make a video talking about sort of all of these different meta changes. We're going first, which is interesting. Definitely don't want to start Marshadow or Mew, but I am gonna bench the Marshadow for sure. Going first is tough. Like most aggro decks do want to go second. We're not playing sort of the Mankey Primeape, and decks that do play Mankey and Primeape do typically like to, to go first. But we, on the other hand, don't really love going first. We're playing against Volcarona, and Volcarona is actually not bad at all. It's kind of a counter matchup actually to our deck, which has a lot of 80 or less HP Pokemon that we like to have in play. Okay, so we haven't seen the Hitmonlee yet, and this is sort of an interesting scenario, but next turn we can Aerodactyl and Sabrina. I'm going to wait on the Mew. Now, Sabrina and Aerodactyl could mean that we stop our opponent from evolving his Larvesta, which would be hilarious. Aerodactyl puts in a lot more work than you might think, if I'm being 100% honest. Okay, so he benches the Moltres. That kind of protects us, rather, from Sabrina, which is a little unfortunate, I'm not going to lie. For sure. But here, let's evolve our Aerodactyl. We should have evolved the full art one. I'm not sure why I didn't. Now, are we... Okay, here's the question, right? What do we want to do here? What do we want? I think it's probably fine if we just attack the Druddigon, or would we rather bring up the Moltres and start doing damage to it? I kind of feel like I would rather... Yeah, I'm not going to play Sabrina yet. I don't like wasting Sabrina early in the game. There's just more scenarios where Sabrina can kind of come in handy. And that's why I don't necessarily want to do that. I'm just going to do the sort of the poke damage on the Druddigon. Might not be the sort of the best case scenario, but I did just sort of want to attack with the Farfetch'd and put a little bit of pressure on my opponent. I kind of want to force him to have to switch into the Moltres here. He's playing Water Energies as well. Okay, and here comes the Volcarona, which is pretty tough. So, okay, so we see the Sabrina actually, which isn't terrible. Now, Volcarona, you discard 2 energies from the Pokemon, and it does 80 damage to any one of our Pokemon, which is really strong. If we're being honest with you, it's a really, really strong attack. But okay, here, what do we want? What do we want to do here? This is a really interesting matchup. I think Volcarona is a really great counter to our deck. Certainly not a meta deck by any sort of stretch of the imagination. It's not very consistent to any degree, but it is a very strong card, especially since we have a lot of Pokemon with less than 80 HP in our deck. So I think we're just going to attach to the Aerodactyl and we're going to pass. Next turn, we can kind of Sabrina. We can force this Druddigon out. Or what we can do if we... Okay, so he has 1 card in hand. Can he retreat out? Is this a leaf? It's not. Okay. So here's what we're definitely going to do. We're just going to take the KO on the Druddigon. We're going to take a little bit of damage, but I'm not super stressed about that. He's discarding 2 energies every time he does it. So Volcarona can't attack every turn, right? And after we KO this Druddigon here, what we might see from our opponent is that he might actually just go into his Moltres and accelerate energies that way. I actually wouldn't really be surprised if we saw that from our opponent. Now, Volcarona has a retreat cost of 2, so depending on what he hits here on this Inferno Dance, we might want to play a Sabrina and force him into the Volcarona with no energies. But probably not, actually. I don't know. It's probably still better for us to just attack the Moltres, because we can do a bench snipe of our own. We can attach our energies to our Mew EX and kind of do a bench snipe. Okay, so he only gets 1 energy. He's probably going to attach it, yeah, to this Volcarona, which is totally fine. Totally fine. I'm going to commit my energies to the Mew. Everything else is kind of more susceptible to getting KO'd, if I'm being honest with you. Yeah, we're definitely just we're gonna just attack. Because now basically we have Mew EX copying the Volcanic Ash attack from Volcarona as a win condition, basically, right? So this, okay, here comes the, here comes this. I'm actually just gonna bring up the Farfetch'd because if he doesn't KO it, or if he does, it really doesn't matter to us. So we have energy onto it. I would rather just do this. We're not gonna be able to attack with Mew this turn anyway. So he does have some extra energies on the Volcarona, so he can attack with Volcarona twice in a row. But it's not really worth it for him to do that. I think honestly his best game plan here, like oh wait, what is he doing? He just Inferno danced? He lost. Why did he do that? Why did he Inferno dance? We're just gonna KO him. Why would he do that? I don't know. That was a misplay on his part. Geez, I thought this was going to be like an interesting, yeah, he misplayed. Okay. All right. Well, I thought that was going to be a fun, interesting matchup, but I think we probably would have won regardless. I mean, it depends. If he were to attack with Volcarona into our Mew EX, it could have been a little tricky for sure, but I think we win that matchup either way. Our pacing was just a little bit too high. Yeah, that's unfortunate from our opponent. I mean, that could have been a really interesting game. It's unfortunate that he misplayed there. Okay, you know what? Let's do one more game. Let's do one more game. We're on a massive win streak here. We're absolutely cruising. Let's just play one more, and if it's a sweep, it's a sweep. But again, I just wanted to showcase this deck in a little bit more in depth. So yeah, let's do it. But I really do love this matchup. I think Mew EX is so underrated right now. There's a lot of different ways to play Mew EX, right? You can build a deck that's really focused around Mew EX. You can kind of just throw it in Mewtwo, right, and play it in other Psychic-type decks, or you can kind of play it as sort of an ancillary, geez, we're just starting with Hitmonlee in every game. Or you can kind of throw it in basically any deck as sort of an ancillary matchup. I think it's really good in Fighting-type decks, especially with Hitmonlee or even Primeape as well, as sort of a second option, basically, in those matchups where, you know, the aggro deck sort of style doesn't necessarily fit very well. Or do very well in that particular matchup. A lot of times Mew EX can kind of cover those downsides. And that's one of the big things that Mew EX does in a lot of different decks. It basically kind of covers the bad matchups for you. Okay, and here we see the Old Amber and the Aerodactyl. Now, I actually really like Aerodactyl because it's so consistent. So I'm just going to bench the Old Amber and we're going to pass. I have a Sabrina in hand. An early Sabrina with Aerodactyl could be crazy next turn. And that's sort of this really great combination of this deck that I really do like. The ability to kind of go into Aerodactyl early, Sabrina up a basic Pokemon that wants to evolve early in the game, and just sort of start chipping with Hitmonlee. The fact that Aerodactyl's ability works while it's on the bench is so strong. The fact that Hitmonlee is able to attack the bench while dodging the rough skin from Druddigon, it's just so good in the format right now. I think people are going to really have to swap around the decks that they're playing. Okay, so he's actually just going to go straight in to his and attach energies to his Druddigon, which I think is probably a smart move on his part if I'm being 100% honest with you. But we are safe here to just attach to the Aerodactyl, and I think we could bench the Farfetch'd. Do we really? Are we going to need Mew EX? We don't benefit anything by really benching that Farfetch'd yet, because we can set it up in one turn. But yeah, so it's just so good. Like the Fighting Toolbox deck is really good. I think things are going to get refined a little bit in terms of how people are playing this deck. Certainly, you know, it could make a lot of sense to play the deck in a particular way, for sure. Okay, so he's actually going to bench the Froakie and then attach an energy to it, which is really interesting. Which now means we can just go ahead and start committing our energies to our Hitmonlee and start attacking, for sure. Okay, so we did draw into the Mew EX. I don't really want to bench Farfetch because it's so low on HP, and if this Greninja gets set up, it could be really stressful for us. But, oh man, okay. So here's the thing, right? We're gonna stretch kick right now. Basically, a red card would be nice, but we could have played the Sabrina. If we had an X speed, I would have just attached to the Aerodactyl, retreated into it, and played the Sabrina. But basically, even if he evolves into Frogadier here, which he is, we have Sabrina, we have Aerodactyl, so we're gonna take a KO on this Frogadier next turn, no matter what. If I'm being honest with you, I don't necessarily see that he's probably going to. What else is he running in his deck list? It's probably just Mew EX. I don't know what this. He's got water energies, so this is an interesting matchup here. He goes into his Frogadier and he discards the energy. Wow, okay. I guess he just wants to get the attack off on Hitmonlee. I don't know exactly. I think he's struggling here. I think this is he's riding the struggle bus a little bit. I don't mind discarding the energy to take the KO here. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to retreat out, save this Hitmonlee, go into our Aerodactyl. I think he's just drawing pretty poorly, which is probably why he did that. He just didn't have many other options. I expected him to stay in the active spot, but we had Sabrina anyway, so the scenario that just happened was going to happen either way. But yeah, our deck is really consistent. That's the other really great upside with a deck like this, is running primarily basic Pokemon, and Aerodactyl is just really easy to get set up. And here's the Magikarp. Wow, that's tough. Okay, so we're playing Gyarados. I probably should have guessed that. I'm not sure why I didn't guess that, if we're being honest here, but this Magikarp is absolutely done. And at least we got to showcase Hitmonlee and how it works against Magikarp, at least. So yeah, flipping tails on Misty as well. No concession from our opponent yet, which is actually pretty cool. Kudos to him. If I were him, I definitely would have conceded quite a while ago. But yeah, we're just going to retreat. We are going to discard energies here, but we're just going to go ahead. We're going to take the KO on the Magikarp. There's no reason not to. It's just so strong. We even have Sabrina next turn to bring up this Frogadier, or the Froakie, to stop it from evolving. The combination between Sabrina and Aerodactyl with Hitmonlee, and then the backup sort of options of Mew EX with Marshadow is really the bread and butter of this deck. And that's going to be another concession from our opponent. Okay, so that wasn't that many, I guess, interesting games or close games. But you know what? This deck is so strong and it's so good into the metagame right now that it's kind of the perfect anti-meta choice, that I really honestly think that this might be, at least at the moment, the way that the metagame is shaping up right now, this might be one of the best options for you to play in the format right now. I'm actually really excited to do my next meta analysis video and my meta update video to talk a lot more about how this deck and other decks sort of interact in more detail. But yeah, this deck is just so strong, and absolutely just clean sweep. We just dominated all of these matches. I was hoping to get something a little bit more interesting. That Volcarona game was actually could have been really interesting, but our opponent did unfortunately misplay. I think we had the win anyway, but comment below what you think about this deck. How are you playing fighting type decks right now in the format? What do you think of this new sort of rise of aggro decks in the format right now? I'm really interested to see what you guys think. What do you think of this deck list? How would you change it? How would you play these cards a little bit differently? I would love to hear down in the comment section below. Don't forget to like the video, guys. Don't forget to subscribe. It means a lot to me. The support has been crazy over the last few weeks, and I really do appreciate it. But we're going to get out of here, guys. Have a good one. Peace out.